Hello there. Today, I had been all set on another subject when a close friend of mine rang me, anger in her voice, very noticeable. She had just seen a television talk show, and there was something in that had angered her, so that I had to listen to her and I had to do something about it in my future videos. Now, for you to understand what the anger was about, I have to go back a little. In Corona, we have learned a new word, system relevant. I suppose in your languages there must be something close to that as well. Something was relevant or it's very important to upkeeping our system. Now, it's not quite true that it was completely new, because in the financial crisis a few years ago, we had learned that banks were so system relevant that our states supported them with billions of euros or dollars or whatever. Now, in the Corona crisis, something completely different was system relevant. Nurses. Do you remember? And it was, I should make it more precise, nurses both in hospitals and also nurses in homes where they look after the elderly. And do you remember at the beginning of the crisis, I particularly remember it in Spain, each evening people stepped out on their balconies to applaud these nurses for what they had been doing for the country. And so we learned how very important these jobs for the upkeep of our system are. Now, at the same time, and that was, I remember distinctly, at the very same time, in my daily online newspaper, I read just a little article about an internationally renowned firm, a firm that work in business consulting. And in the town in which I live, apparently, I hadn't known, there is a branch of this very renowned, very big, very international firm. And the 1,500 people who worked there were sent home within a week. No, not, as one might expect, to work from home. No, not to do anything, because they were of no relevance. Don't you think this is interesting that we started to realize what and who was relevant and what or who wasn't? And they just went home and nobody cared. Now, the interesting thing, nurses, of course, are female and badly paid. Business consultants are mostly male and very highly paid. And now I come back to this friend of mine. This talk show she had listened to was also about this relevance of jobs. And she was angry because it suddenly hit her that the most relevant of all jobs, and in the talk show they hadn't said that, were mothers. Mothers. Just imagine, and she's right, of course, isn't she? Just imagine, for whatever reason, mothers all around the world, or women in general, if you like, just refuse to do their jobs. What would happen of all of us? Just imagine, they would stop looking after babies, small children. They would stop feeding them, clothing them, sending them to school, helping them in their homework, seeing to it that they become decent human beings, loving them, caring for them. They would stop tomorrow. And they would also stop looking after their parents, the elderly, my generation and even more, and they would stop looking after us. What would become of us? Ha! Now you might argue, what about the men? Because every human being has a mother and a father. Well, do you think that fathers would take on the job of the mothers if the mothers, for whatever reason, went on strike? No, don't we? Of course, not 100%. I'm sure there's wonderful fathers, but in many, many countries, fathers don't take fathering very importantly, do they? Not very seriously, not very responsibly. One of my brothers, who more or less my age, who, when he was still working, worked in many, many, many countries around the world, he often told the following story, that he was asked in many countries how many children he had, because for his renommee, for his standing, it seemed to have been important how many children he had. And up to today, he says, but make a child. Any idiot can make a child. There's no big deal doing that. Why would that be so important? But then, looking after a child, that's the job to be done. And now my question, and this may look like a rhetorical question, but it's not. I mean it seriously. Thinking about this, thinking about the importance of mothers, women's non-paid jobs. How was it possible that men were able to convince women that they are less important, the women, and also that they, the men, are more important? Huh? How did they manage to convince us of this fact? And how, perhaps even more astounding, how did they manage to convince themselves of that? Now, I don't want to get mad at either. My future view would be, how about that? How about sharing responsibility in this world? Men and women together, but a true sharing, and leaving behind that one job is more important than another, and that one sex is more important than another. Will you think about that? Bye for now.